Welcome, viewers and listeners, to another edition of CHP Talks. I'm here today with Helen Ward, who is with Kids First Canada. And Helen, thanks for joining us today and talking to our viewers and listeners about the importance of parents and children and how government should deal with those things differently than they do.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to give you a little introduction here, and just let me let our listeners know that Helen Ward is a single mother of two. She's the president of Kids First Parent Association of Canada, and Kids First was founded in 1987, and it's a national charity with two purposes: support for children's optimal well-being and support and recognition for parental care of children. Helen has been published by or quoted in numerous media outlets, including CBC, Chorus Network, Yahoo, Ottawa Citizen, Financial Post, National Post, Globe and Mail, Costco Connection, Rebel News, Vancouver Sun, and so on. She has written reports for Cardis Family and submissions for the federal government. So it's a real privilege to have you with us today, Helen.
Thanks.
And I don't know quite where to start. I guess, when did you first get involved with this organization, Kids First? Are you the founder of it, or did you?
No, I'm not the founder. I got involved with these issues. I think it was 2000, and then I got involved with Kids First a year or two after that. Yeah, the organization was actually in the process of folding when I called them, and they just kept it going.
Wonderful. So I wanted to ask you about what it is, the special relationship that parents and children have. The state or the government seems inclined to minimize the importance of the parent-child relationship, and even in some cases, they want to say, well, the kids belong to us, the state, and you parents are just co-partners with us.
Yeah.
But can you speak a little bit about the importance of and the uniqueness of the child-parent relationship?
Well, there's lots been written about that by psychologists over the years. It's a children need. It's the irreducible need of a child to have an attachment relationship with at least one, or maybe a few, parent figures. If parents died, obviously the parent can't be there, but somebody who fulfills that role, who meets the child's need, who has unconditional love for the child, whom the child is attached to. The parent is in the natural position for that, because the mother bears the child in her womb. The child attaches to the mother while in the womb from the voice and the smell, and can hear the voice of other close people, perhaps the father or siblings or other people who are close to it from the womb. Of course, it's not always possible for a child to be raised by their parents. But when that doesn't happen, when for some reason the mother dies, parents leave for whatever reason, that's a profound wound to the child. We're hearing a lot about trauma even before birth. Dr. Gabor Mate actually talks a lot about trauma at early childhood and even before birth in the womb, if a mother is distressed, or if the mother for some reason abandons the child or cannot raise the child. That's a profound stress to the child that affects them throughout their life and needs healing. So this relationship is irreducible, and parents are the ones who are legally, in every respect, in charge of their child's rearing and education. And we delegate, according to the law, we delegate to other people who can be involved, such as teachers or whoever else is looking after our children. But it's a unique relationship. Dr. Gordon Neufeld, he's a leading developmental psychologist, internationally renowned, who's based here in Vancouver. He says parents are children's best bet. Parents are not perfect.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, if you are a parent or you know any parents, you'll know that parents are not perfect, but we're the best bet. We have it's like a biological, societal imperative to look after our children. People are sometimes, when they become parents, they're shocked at the depth of the feeling. I mean, that willingness of parents to sacrifice for their children. Of course, it's not all in all cases, but it's the norm. It's sort of a biological norm. When a parent does abandon a child, we hear these terrible stories of a mother who's given birth and chucked out the child or something. Those are very shocking because it is very rare and it's very unusual, and there's something, so to speak, unnatural about that. But obviously, that kind of a person has been harmed, has trauma themselves, that they would do that. So.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of information in the States, maybe more than in Canada. Some of these research organizations have looked a lot into the results of fatherlessness, particularly. But I guess it could apply in both ways, father or mother. But certainly, when both parents are gone for whatever reason, children can adapt to situations, but they have to overcome those difficulties, and not
Well, in
all.
those situations where a child isn't that, then it's often somebody who's call it a rescuer person. It's most often a grandmother, but it could be somebody else who comes in and fulfills that role, who meets the child's attachment needs, who fulfills them, who is delighted to in the presence of the child, who has unconditional love, and well, even though that's not perfect, but is willing to sacrifice and be there for the child. I mean, it's amazing how kids do with even like badly flawed parents. It's still something that's essential to a child's well-being.
Related to this, in terms of political, policies and things like that, I mean, obviously, we, the Christian Heritage Party, are interested, and our theme is life, family, and freedom. Family being, a central theme of ours. Can you speak a little bit to the cost? And there's both a financial cost and a societal cost of having the state look after your kids. I mean, I think one of the things that happens in our society today, the financial cost of everything, of housing and food and everything, is so high that even when there are two parents in the home, it's often the case that both parents feel that they need to work, so that the children, not only when they get into school age, but even before school age, are in some kind of either a private or state-run childcare. And there's a financial cost to that. Can you talk about those costs at all?
Yeah, well, when somebody other than the parents is looking after the child, like basically a stranger, there's all these costs that kick in, just as criminal record check costs, supervisory costs, qualification costs. I've got two sons. One's in his teens, one's an adult. I'm not actually qualified to work in a daycare. I don't have an ECE certificate. And you're not qualified either. You would count as unqualified and care of unknown quality. So would I. So
even though we've raised children, right? So
yeah. So and when you're, a daycare center, well, you've got to have, there's capital costs, the land, the site, even if it's at a school, that's a cost of using that site for that, the buildings, the facilities, and the facilities are typically, I'll call them single-use facilities. Like a group of adults can't typically use a daycare center because the toilets are too small, the chairs are too small, the facilities are single-purpose oriented, so they're not multi-use. Then you've got all the training costs for the staff, and monitoring their training and ticking off their qualifications and all that, and the administrative overload there. And then there's staff, I mean, staff are paid, on a hourly or a monthly basis. There's their benefits, their pensions, their holiday pay. I mean, if a staff member is sick and can't go to work, well, then somebody else has to fill in. So you're paying for the staff member and this fill-in worker, and they will be. They often get sick more often because daycare has a lot of more illnesses associated with it because of the high germ and bacterial overload in daycares, and then there's higher janitorial costs. And I mean, in your own home, or it's you do some cleaning, I'm sure, but in a daycare, you've got to. I mean, every single toy and surface must be like sterilized, sanitized frequently, like multiple times a day, even because of the high bacterial and viral overload in centers. Because you've got children from different backgrounds, their mucus, their saliva, their poop, their pee, and all the rest of it. And little children can't monitor all that, so it's. And then then there's all these health costs because kids do get sick more often. According to the Swedish government, children in daycare centers get sick 6.7 times more often than children who are in a home setting. So you have costs of like ear infections are one common thing. Very common, and then multiple ear infections. So we have kids getting surgery on their I don't know whatever part of the ear because they're having hearing problems, hearing loss at very young ages. A friend of mine's child was 8; he had 50% hearing loss from multiple ear infections. So. And then more upper respiratory infections, longer lasting illness. I mean, there's all these medical costs that are added on by that particular form of care. And then the parents and the grandparents get sick more often, and they maybe have to go to the hospital or get medication or go to the doctor, or if they have a job, take time off work to look after their kid, or because they're just sick. So there's so many different costs. I mean, daycare centers are the most expensive form of care and the most problematic in terms of children's well-being, their emotional and physical health and development, language learning, and all that. So, and then there's the cost of making up for all that. I mean, the studies, like in Canada, we have the Quebec daycare system, which was put in place $5 a day. It was in 1997 began, and that's been studied by top economists. Milligan and Baker in Canada. They did a study, I think it was 5 years, and then a 20-year follow-up study. Higher rates of illness for parents and kids, more problematic behaviors, aggression and all that by the kids, non-compliance, more strained parent-child relationships, mothers more depressed. These are all costs, and they calculate that the increased taxes that were received because there was more participation in jobs by moms would cover 40% of the cost of the program. Oh, they also calculated at the 20-year mark in their study that there was higher youth crime in Quebec following this program compared to the rest of Canada. This is very rigorous research using statistical evidence from Stats Canada. So, I mean, this is. It's a massive tragedy. Yeah. What we're doing to children. Our policies are not based on solid empirical evidence. They're based on, I just say it's like if we had engineers designing bridges who didn't believe in gravity. We have social engineers designing policy for society, for children that don't believe in attachment theory. They reject that and any evidence based on that. There's some costs.
Yeah, well, and yet often in the political realm, you get demands from people or from advocacy groups for, for state-run and taxpayer-funded daycare, which, of course, I mean, for those families that are able to manage things and look after themselves, that they're not a net consumer of this, if it would be considered a benefit. But they are the ones that have to pay for it. And of course, when you add it all up, it's not being $5 a day to cover the cost. That's just a tip of the iceberg.
It should be known. Like people, I often ask people the question: what percentage of children 0 to 5 do you think are in daycare centers in Canada? Typically, people start, you can think of your own answers, you'll start at 50% and go higher. That is not true. The if you look at Stats Canada data, you have to actually do some math. When you do their data, they'll say something like 50 or 60% of children are in childcare, which means any amount of any form of non-parental childcare. And about 30% of those are in daycare centers. So that you have to multiply. So it's about 15 to 18% of children 0 to 5 are in daycare centers in Canada. So it's a minority, a relatively small minority, because every child needs childcare
Yeah.
24/7, 365, not just,
Yeah.
9 to 5 or whatever.
Exactly.
So, there's a misperception about what actually is the reality out there. But what this means is that a minority of care is being funded massively, and the majority of care, the majority of kids, the majority of parents are getting zero funding for their childcare costs, which is extremely unfair. And like you said, the advocacy groups, they'll say, "Oh, this is really in high demand. Parents are screaming for this. Parents are demanding this. There's way more demand than supply." Well, that is, whoever asks parents what they want, when they do ask parents what they want, which is like, they don't want to ask parents what they want. Parents would prefer to look after their own children themselves, and to control that. Daycare centers are the least preferred option, but they're the most preferred by particular, ideological groups who are the ones who are funded by the government to do advocacy, like the Child Care Advocacy Association of Canada, the Child Care Research and Resource Unit, and here in Vancouver, we have the UBC's Human Early Learning Partnership and Generation Squeeze. Those are government-funded advocacy groups pushing for this. So it's a total policy distortion. I always tell the politicians, if you want to win the election, tell them you're going to fund the child. That you're not going to fund daycare. You're going to put that funding, all the childcare funding, and send it to parents directly. You'll win the election. Harper won in 2006 with that kind of a policy, and Trudeau won in 2015, saying he was going to fund increase funding to the Canadian Child Benefit rather than funding daycare. So, because most people aren't using it. So,
Oh, very good, very interesting. I was not aware of those statistics.
No, it's
So there are services aside from daycare. There are other services that families sometimes require for their children. Maybe speech therapy, there are various types of things. Can you run down a short list of the type of services that families actually benefit from, and that we would continue to benefit from outside of a state-funded program?
Well, there's tutoring, music lessons. That's because I do those two things. All kinds of therapeutic services, like for autism or speech therapy, or for hearing and vision impaired kids. There's parent. People are struggling with some parenting issues. There's parent consultation. I'm going to recommend the Neufeld Institute. Go to Neufeld's organization. There's services like sports teams, martial arts, crafts, learning, all kinds of services, and math. Kids who have trouble with math. Where I live, there's math tutoring places close by. There's many services that parents want for their kids, that and they will purchase them, but they'd be more able to purchase them if the money went to us. When you got all the, sometimes money, for children with special needs, goes to schools. Like in BC, there's 3 different funding levels. It's something like about depending on the level of the disability. Level 1 is about $11,000. Level 2 is, I think, $22,000, and level 3 is $42,000 on top of the other funding that the child will receive. Now that money goes to the school, and then the school can, hire some kind of education assistance or whatever for the child. But if the parent had that money and they wanted as an option, if the parent's happy with the school having that, that's fine. Yeah. But if the parent wanted to hire speech therapists, they could contract directly. Instead, they have to go through this school, and then there's the delay, and then there's delay, and then there's approval, and all this kind of stuff. And it's I actually, my son now, he's getting some physiotherapy for a sports injury. I mean, there's all kinds of things that parents will purchase for their child. I mean, it's not like there's going to be a lack of jobs for people, because parents will spend the money that they can access on all kinds of things for their kids. I mean, there's all outdoor activities, scouts, guides, camps, all kinds of services parents want for their kids. But this, I mean, this sort of middleman, the government and all that bureaucracy between the parent and the service provider is a big, it's a big loss of money. I mean, it's just a sort of waste of funds.
So can you visualize a way in which that money could be directed to parents as needed? Obviously, not every parent needs a speech therapist or whatever. So what would that look like?
Well, there's sort of childcare is separate from education funding, though it's kind of getting merged in BC. The Ministry of Education has become the Ministry of Education and Childcare. But if childcare funding all went to parents based on the age and the number of children they have, and we could also factor in income there, that would be one lot of funding. And I'm not the only person saying this. It could be done in the form of a increased Canadian child benefit amount, or a refundable tax credit. And the school funding, if you're totally happy with the school system or whatever, that's great. But there needs to be an option where the parents could receive the full funding that their child would be entitled to themselves. And that's actually something that's available in the BC School Act, though it hasn't been used to my knowledge. So you could access those services yourself. I mean, including the special needs funding if you have a special needs designated child. It's totally doable. It's not even complicated. In fact, it would simplify some things, because the childcare funding, because there's a federal money, provincial money, and even local governments and multiple bureaucracies in all these things to decide, how much money goes to this particular daycare center for this particular kid who's going there for 3 days a week, but not 5 days a week. And depending on all sorts of, it's very complicated. And all that complication means a whole bunch of money sort of flowing off into people who are working in bureaucracies. And I've got nothing against people working in bureaucracies, but maybe they'd be able to find a job, providing a service that a direct service that a parent would like, and that could be some kind of childcare, direct childcare, or maybe a particular skill or talent or whatever that you have. I mean, parents, we want help, we'll hire people to do stuff,
We actually, the Christian Heritage Party of BC actually has a policy that for even education, that the money would follow the child rather than the parents and child having to fit into a standard mold and go to the school close by. They should be able to choose the kind of education that they want for their child. And if the same amount of dollars were allocated for every child in the province for education, and then the parents could decide where that money would be best applied, whether homeschooling or in a private school or in a public school.
I use the term parent-directed education because, typically people who homeschool and the homeschooling organizations, and people who criticize homeschooling, they'll have an image of a mom and two blonde kids sitting at a kitchen table with a book or a computer. And it's like, well, maybe that happens, but they also might be outside, or they might not be with the mom. They could be, it just means that you're directing. It doesn't mean you're providing all of the, teaching yourself, but you might be doing that, but just, it would benefit all kinds of parents who have, the school system doesn't work for all kinds of reasons. Maybe your child's being bullied. Maybe your child's becoming a bully. Maybe your child's got some allergies. Maybe, you want to travel, or all kinds of things. And the fact is that, legally speaking, parents are the ones who are in charge of their child's education and rearing. according to international law, the Supreme Court of Canada. So this mistrust of parents has kind of been built into our laws, and since I'd say the 1800s, when Edgerton Ryerson, he was a leading Christian politician figure in Canada in the 1840s. He wrote 2 reports. One of those reports was what started the compulsory school attendance laws, and the other report is what started the residential schools for Indigenous kids. And there was something about his thinking. There was like a mistrust of the parent-child relationship. Like, we can't fund the parents. We got to make sure we fund certified people. And that's sort of how it all got. It's a sort of a colonialist, antediluvian attitude towards parents. And in the human rights laws now, you're not allowed, like, you can't discriminate based on, sex or race or all those sorts of things. And you also can't discriminate based on family status. And the status of being a parent of a minor child or a minor child of a parent is a family status that's been recognized by the courts. And so why do we discriminate against parents? Like, it's just like saying, we're not going to fund you because you're Polish or you're Jewish or something like that.
Since the beginning of time, parents have been raising children, and I guess if they had failed repeatedly, we wouldn't even be here, right? So, goes from nursing, at the very beginning, and sort of daily hygiene and all that, providing nourishment, keeping the kid from running out into traffic, and all the various things that parents do to protect their children from harm, to encourage their learning. I mean, if a parent points to a bird, says, that's a robin and whatever, that's all education, right?
Yeah.
And
well, they provide just an identity, like, you're part of this family, we live here, we have this background, we speak this language, we're learning that language. I mean, it's just, these are the things we do, these are the celebrations we celebrate. That's really necessary.
I think that's you really nailed it there in terms of the attachment, the word attachment, and how important that is for a child to feel a part of a family, to feel their place in the universe, so to speak, through the warm human connection of parents and siblings. That's very extremely important. So your website, kidsfirstcanada.org, we'll put that in the show notes. What are some things that you want to be sure we cover before we close off? This has been very tremendous information.
Yeah. Well, our website is going to be sort of under reconstruction. If you go to the website, go to the little tab that says issues and scroll down from there about all sorts of things. I mean, I could talk briefly about the conflict in the school system these days. There's all these, a lot of people are very upset about some things that's being instruction and stuff related to, I'll say, sex and identity issues. I just say, we live in a pluralistic society, and that means that people disagree. If you would believe that, we would. The Christians used to slaughter each other for centuries. I think we've just stopped doing that relatively recently. So diversity and difference of opinion and difference of practice is something that we have to deal with. So some families are going to be happy with all the current school policies and things. Others are going to be happy with some of them and not all of them, and some are going to be happy with not whatever, and they might be very unhappy. But if we believe that parents are the ones who direct their child's upbringing and education, I would just suggest that just having a logistics. It's a logistics question for the school system, because the school system is legally required to welcome, include, support, and keep everybody safe, emotionally and physically. And it's actually really hard to do, because you've got such diversity now and such completely, incompatible beliefs and practices. I'm not sure how a school system is supposed to do that. But the system, the logistics have to be that the people can have what they want for their child's education. And that will look very different for different people. But if we could go for that and, just can be concerned about what we want for our child, and also the teachers who don't want to teach some things and do want to teach other things, they should also be standing up for their freedom of association rights, like so that we could maybe take the temperature down, but just fight for what we want for our children, and people can have what they want for their children.
Right, and that's where if the dollars would follow the child under the parent's direction, then the parents could choose the setting that where they are comfortable, where they feel the child is getting the best educational and societal benefit with the amount of dollars. So, ladies and gentlemen, visit kidsfirstcanada.org, and Helen Ward, we really appreciate what you've shared with us today, and
Thank you.
I'm very encouraged to have someone like you in the front lines standing up for the rights of children and their parents for the best outcomes in our society.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, and God bless you.
Bye-bye.